What's a secret you keep hidden because revealing it could destroy your life? Story 1. I've been living a double life for years, and I'm not sure how much longer I can keep it up. I'm married, have 2 kids, and I love my family with all my heart. But the secret I'm hiding is that I have a completely different identity online. Years ago, I got into the world of online gaming and found a community of people who share the same interests I do. Over time, it became more than just gaming. I started forming close friendships with people who have no idea about my real life. I've kept this secret because if my family found out, it would devastate them. They wouldn't understand how I've formed these friendships and spent so much time in this virtual world. I've lied about my whereabouts, made up excuses to avoid family activities, and even lied about who I am in these online communities. Sometimes I tell my family I'm working late or going out for a work-related event. But in reality, I'm meeting up with my online friends. They're the only ones who truly understand, and I fear if they ever found out, it would ruin everything. I've tried to disconnect several times, but I always fall back into it. It's like an addiction, and now I'm too deep in it. I wish I could just be open and honest, but the thought of everything falling apart is too much to bear. I'm terrified that one day, the truth will come out, and there will be no way to undo the damage. Story 2. When I was 19, I made a decision that I would carry with me for the rest of my life. I was struggling with depression, and during a particularly dark moment, I made an impulsive choice that I regret deeply. I found myself involved in a car accident. It wasn't serious. No one was hurt, and the other car involved was only slightly damaged. But the thing is, it was my fault. I panicked, and instead of staying at the scene and dealing with it like I should have, I fled. I didn't want to face the consequences, especially because I knew I had been drinking, and my mental state was a mess. The guilt has haunted me every day since then, and the thought of being caught terrifies me. If my parents or anyone found out, I know they'd be heartbroken. It was one of the lowest moments of my life, and I never told a soul about it. I'm a better person now. I've done a lot of work on myself, and I've moved past that dark, but that secret is always with me, and I know that if it ever comes to light, it will ruin everything. I've tried to be a responsible and law-abiding person since, but I can't erase what I did. I'm afraid that if it ever comes out, it'll change how everyone sees me forever. Story 3. I had an affair 2 years ago. It's something that I still can't believe I did, and I can never take it back. My partner and I had been together for nearly 6 years, and everything seemed perfect on the outside. But deep down, I felt ignored and unimportant. Then I met someone new and I felt alive again. It was exciting. It was risky. And in a twisted way, it felt like I was in control of something for once. The affair only lasted a few months, but the guilt never stopped. Every time I looked at my partner, I felt like a liar, but I also knew I couldn't tell them the truth. It would break them in ways that I couldn't even comprehend, and I'd lose everything I had worked so hard for. The worst part? I'm still in the relationship. My partner has no idea, and I honestly don't know how to leave without everything falling apart. I'm terrified of being exposed, but at the same time I wish I could tell the truth and free myself from the shame. Every day I feel like I'm living a lie, and I know it's only a matter of time before I either confess or get caught. But until then, I'm stuck in this never-ending cycle of guilt, regret, and fear. Story 4. I used to be a con artist. It wasn't something I'm proud of, but it's something I did to survive. A few years ago, I was living on the streets, struggling to get by. I had no family or support system, and I was desperate. That's when I started running scams. It started small, convincing people to give me money for emergency expenses, but over time, I got more ambitious. I ran fake charities, pretended to be someone I wasn't, and scammed people out of thousands of dollars. I've since turned my life around. I'm no longer living on the streets, and I've built a stable career. I'm married now, and we're starting a family. But my past, it still haunts me. If anyone found out about the things I did, especially my spouse, I know it would destroy everything I've worked so hard for. I've kept this secret for so long, and I'm scared that one day it will come out and I'll lose everything. I don't regret turning my life around, but I wish I could erase those years of deceit. Every time I see my spouse, I wonder if they'd still love me if they knew who I really was. If they ever find out, it could be the end of everything. I just hope it never happens. Story 5. When I was in high school, I was bullied pretty badly. It was a tough time, and I never really told anyone how much it affected. But there's one thing I did that no one knows about. To get revenge on my bullies, I started spreading lies about them. At first, it was just harmless rumors. But then I got carried away. I told people about personal things that weren't true, made up relationships and situations that humiliated them. It felt like I had the power for once, and it was intoxicating. The worst part is that some of the things I said got back to them, and it destroyed friendships and reputations. Looking back, I feel terrible about what I did. I was just a kid, and I didn't understand how much damage I was causing. But if anyone ever found out what I did, especially my friends from that time. I know it would destroy them. I've tried to move on and make amends with my life, but I can't shake the guilt. It's been years, but the secret of what I did still hangs over. I think about it often and wonder if I should confess to the people I hurt. But the fear of how they'd react, how much they'd hate me, stops me. I don't know if I'll ever be able to truly forgive myself. Story 6. I'm a successful entrepreneur, and on the surface, my life seems perfect. I run a growing tech company, have a loving spouse, and 2 wonderful kids. But there's a secret I've been hiding for years that could completely shatter my entire life. A decade ago, before I found success, I was in a deeply toxic relationship. It wasn't just emotionally abusive, it was physically abusive as well. I was manipulated, gaslighted, and humiliated. The worst part? I never told anyone. Not a single person knew the extent of what I was going through. I was so embarrassed. I was supposed to be strong, but I felt powerless and stuck. My partner at the time was a well-known figure in the community, and I feared that if I told anyone what was going on, it would ruin my reputation and career. So I kept it quiet. I distanced myself from friends and family, pretending everything was fine. I eventually found the courage to leave, but the damage was already done. It left deep scars that still affect me today, even though I've moved on. The most painful part of all of this is that I have never been able to share my experience with my spouse. She knows I went through a difficult breakup, but she has no idea the extent of the emotional and physical abuse. I've tried to talk to her about it, but I'm terrified of how she'll react. I fear she'll think less of me, or worse, that she'll leave me. If she found out, it would break her heart, and it would shatter the image I've spent years building. I feel trapped in this lie, and the guilt never goes away. Every time I see my spouse, I wonder if she'd still love me if she knew the full truth. Story 7. I was an only child, and my parents were incredibly strict. They always had high expectations for me, and I spent most of my life trying to meet them. But when I was in college, I started getting into a lot of trouble. I partied too much, failed classes, and got involved with some really bad people. It wasn't who I wanted to be, but it was the only way I knew how to cope with the pressure. One night, I made a mistake that still haunts me. I was driving home after a night of drinking with friends, and I ended up hitting another car. Thankfully, no one was seriously hurt, but I panicked and ran. I left the scene without thinking twice, and I knew it was a crime. For years, I've lived with the guilt of what I did. I never told anyone about the accident. Instead, I went on with my life like it never happened. I graduated college, started a career, and even got married. But every time I think about the crash, I feel sick to my stomach. I could have gone to jail for what I did, and my life would have been over. I don't know if I'll ever be able to live with myself, knowing I ruined someone else's day, maybe their life, by making such a stupid decision. I've never confessed, and I'm not sure I ever will. The fear of losing everything, my career, my family, my future, is too great. If anyone ever found out, I'd lose everything I've worked so hard for. So I continue to live with this secret, silently praying that no one will ever find out. Story 8. There's a part of me that I've never shown to anyone. For years, I've been living with a mental health struggle that I'm too afraid to share. I've dealt with severe depression since I was a teenager, but I've never allowed anyone to see it. I've always been the happy, outgoing person in my circle of friends. I've always made everyone laugh, been the one people go to for advice, and offered a shoulder to cry on. But behind closed doors, I struggle to even get out of bed some days. The thing is, I don't think anyone would believe me if I told them. I've spent so many years perfecting this mask of happiness that no one can see the truth. I'm scared that if I open up, people will think I'm weak or that I'm exaggerating. And I can't stand the idea of burdening others with my problems. I have a family to take care of, and a job that requires my focus and energy. If I tell anyone, I fear they'll think I can't handle things, and that would make me feel like a failure. Every day is a battle, and I'm terrified that one day it'll be too much for me to handle. But I can't let anyone see that. I can't risk my entire life falling apart over something so personal. I just have to keep going, hoping that somehow, someday, it'll get better. Until then, I'll keep hiding behind this mask. Story 9. When I was younger, I made a decision that still haunts me. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. I was a teenager, and I had a crush on a girl who had just moved into town. We started hanging out, and everything was going well until one night. After a party, she passed out, and I made an awful choice. In my drunken state, I crossed a line. I did something to her that I can never take back. The next morning, I was horrified by what I had done. She was confused and didn't remember much, but she was upset. I apologized profusely, but I knew deep down that what I did could ruin both of our lives. She eventually moved away, and I never heard from her again. I've carried the guilt with me all these years, and the shame has eaten away at me. I never told anyone what happened. I couldn't. If anyone found out, my life would be over. I'd be labeled a rapist, and the shame would destroy me. I'm not even sure how to make amends for what I did because I know I can never undo it. Every day, I feel like a piece of me is missing, and the secret weighs me down. I hate myself for what I did, but I'm too scared to ever come clean. I can only hope that somehow she found a way to move on from that night. Story 10. My childhood wasn't easy, and I spent a lot of time alone. I found comfort in food, and over the years I developed an unhealthy relationship with it. I began binge eating to cope with feelings of loneliness and stress. I put on weight quickly, and by the time I reached adulthood I was severely obese. I hated the way I looked, but I continued to eat because it was the only way I could deal with my emotions. I kept my eating habits a secret from everyone. No one knew that I would binge eat in private, then throw up afterward to try to make myself feel better. I never told anyone about the shame I felt every time I ate. I lived in constant fear that someone would find out the truth. I kept my weight gain hidden with baggy clothes and never let anyone see me eat in public. Eventually, I managed to get some help and began to lose weight. But I still haven't come clean to anyone about my struggles with food. I'm terrified that if my friends or family found out, they'd be disgusted. I've worked so hard to overcome this, but the secret is always lurking in the background. I don't know if I'll ever be able to share the truth with anyone, and I'm scared that it will eventually catch up to me. Story 11. I've spent the last 3 years hiding a part of my life that I'm terrified will destroy everything. I'm a college professor, and my life is supposed to be about teaching and guiding young minds. But for the past few years, I've been involved in an online relationship with one of my students. It started innocently enough, just casual chats at first, but over time, it grew into something much more intense. We connected on a level I never expected with someone so much younger than me. The relationship escalated to secret meetings, late-night texts, and even some physical encounters. Every day, I fear it will be discovered. I know it's wrong and I can't even explain why I let it go on for as long as I have. I'm not even sure what I was looking for, but now, it's a tangled mess of emotions, lies, and regret. If anyone found out, I'd lose my job, my career, and probably my reputation in the academic community. I've convinced myself that I love this person, but I know that if I'm caught, it will ruin my entire life. The worst part is that I feel trapped. I don't know how to end it without causing irreparable damage to both our lives. I can't tell my spouse about it because the shame would be unbearable. I can't tell my colleagues because it would get out of hand quickly. And I can't stop myself from continuing the affair because I fear the emptiness I'd feel without it. I live every day with the weight of this secret, constantly looking over my shoulder, wondering when the other shoe will drop. Story 12. When I was in my 20s, I made a decision that changed the course of my life in ways I never expected. I was struggling with financial hardship and had no idea how I was going to make ends meet. A friend of mine introduced me to a world I'd never considered before: selling prescription drugs. At first, it was just a small side gig, buying and selling to a few people to make enough to pay my rent. But it quickly snowballed. I got deeper and deeper into the business, and before I knew it, I was dealing with much more than I could handle. I began selling to people I barely knew, and the risks grew every day. Eventually, I was caught up in a drug bust, but by some miracle, I was never charged. I didn't get arrested, and I didn't end up in jail. I don't know how I got so lucky. I thought about quitting, but by that time, I was already so entangled in it that I couldn't see a way out. Now, almost a decade later, I've completely turned my life around. I have a respectable job, a family, and I've moved past that dark chapter. But the guilt still weighs on me. I never told anyone what I did. If anyone found out, especially my wife, it would destroy everything we've built. The lies I've told to keep my past hidden have become a burden, and I'm terrified that one day, the truth will come out. I live in constant fear that my past will catch up with me and I'll lose everything. Story 13. When I was a teenager, I had a close-knit group of friends, and we all hung out together all the time. We were tight, but there was one friend in particular who had a way of always making me feel like I wasn't good enough. She was the kind of person who would criticize me constantly, but I never said anything because I didn't want to rock the boat. I just took it day after day, telling myself I was lucky to have her in my life. Then, one night, we went out to a party together, and things took a turn. After a few drinks, she started getting meaner. She made cruel comments, mocking me in front of everyone. Something inside me snapped, and I ended up pushing her. Hard. She fell, hit her head on the corner of a table, and was knocked unconscious. Panic set in. I wasn't sure what to do. I helped her up and pretended like nothing happened, but the guilt consumed me. The next day, she had a terrible headache, but I told her to just rest and pretend nothing happened. I never told anyone what had actually happened that night, and I haven't spoken to her since. The worst part is that, years later, I found out she had suffered a mild brain injury. I still don't know if it was from that fall or if it was just a coincidence. But I've been carrying this guilt ever since. Now, we're both adults, and I've moved away from the past, but I can't shake the feeling that I ruined her life, and that she might somehow know it was my fault. If she ever finds out, I don't know how I could live with myself. Story 14. I come from a family that places a huge emphasis on appearances. We were always expected to be perfect. The perfect student, the perfect child, the perfect sibling. I was always the one who tried to live up to those expectations, even if it meant hiding the truth. But when I was 21, I started drinking. At first, it was just a few casual drinks with friends, but it quickly spiraled out of control. I started drinking to numb the pain of a lot of childhood trauma that I hadn't dealt with. I didn't want anyone to know how bad it was. So I started lying to my family, telling them they didn't know I was coming home drunk, hiding bottles of liquor in my room, and skipping work because of hangovers. I was living in a constant state of denial, and I didn't know how to stop. I didn't want to disappoint anyone, especially my parents, so I kept pretending. Eventually, I hit rock bottom. I woke up one morning in a hospital after a blackout, and that's when I realized I needed help. I've been sober for 2 years now, and I've worked hard to rebuild my life, but I've never told my family the truth. They still think I was always the good kid who made good choices. I've worked so hard to protect that image because if they knew the truth, I don't think they'd ever see me the same way again. The guilt of hiding my past from them eats me up inside, and I don't know how long I can keep it up. Story 15. I was in my mid-30s when I made the biggest mistake of my life. I've been married for over a decade to an amazing woman who's everything I could have asked, but for some reason I still felt like something was missing. I wasn't happy, and I couldn't figure out why. That was until I met someone else. It started as a friendship. We met at a work event, and she was charming, intelligent, and everything I thought I wanted. We started texting, hanging out more, and eventually, it turned into something more. We had an affair, one that lasted almost a year. The worst part is that I didn't feel guilty at first. I was so consumed by the excitement of the affair that I ignored the consequences. But as time went on, the guilt started eating away at me. I knew what I was doing was wrong, but I couldn't stop. Eventually, I ended the affair, but the damage was already done. I've been living with this secret ever since, and I'm terrified that one day my wife will find out. I haven't told anyone, and I can't even imagine the fallout if this ever came to light. I love my wife deeply, and I don't want to lose her. But I also know I've betrayed her in the worst way possible. I live every day with the fear that my past will come back to haunt me. Story 16. I've always wanted to be a musician, but for most of my life, I felt like I wasn't good enough. I played guitar in my room, recorded songs for fun, but never shared them with anyone. I spent years telling myself that pursuing music as a career was unrealistic. Instead, I went to college and got a degree in accounting, and I found a decent job in finance. To the outside world, I was living the typical, successful life, but inside, I felt like I was suffocating. One day, I decided to start posting my music online anonymously. At first, I didn't think anyone would notice, but to my surprise, a few people started listening. I got a small following, and before long, I was receiving messages from people who really connected with my songs. It was the first time in my life I felt like I was truly being heard. But the problem is that no one in my personal life knows about this. If my friends and family ever found out that I was pursuing music secretly, they'd be disappointed. They think I'm doing well with my job, and I'd ruin everything by revealing that I'm actually hiding my true passion. I'm terrified that if I tell them, they'll think I wasted my potential, or worse, they'll pity me. But I can't stop making music. It's the only thing that truly makes me feel alive. So I continue to hide this part of me, even though the guilt eats at me every time I interact with anyone in my life. I don't know how much longer I can keep the secret. Story 17. When I was 18, I made a decision that has haunted me for years. I was dating this amazing girl, and we were really in love. We had an intense relationship, and everything seemed perfect, until one night. We had a fight, and I did something unforgivable. I hit her. It was a moment of rage that I can never justify. I don't know why I did it, but the moment the slap landed, I knew I had crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. She was in shock and didn't know how to react, and neither did I. It wasn't just a slap. It was a violation of everything I stood for, everything I believed in. She left me right after that. I begged her to come back, but she never did. I never saw her again. I was so ashamed, so embarrassed, that I never told anyone what happened. My friends all thought she just broke up with me for no reason, but I knew the truth. For years, I carried this guilt with me. I couldn't tell anyone about it because I was terrified of being labeled as a monster. I've been in other relationships since, but every time I find myself in an argument, I remember that. It's always in the back of my mind. I wonder if she's ever moved on from me, or if she still thinks about me. I think about her all the time. wondering what I could have done to undo the damage I caused. I've kept this secret for so long, and I know if it ever came out, I would lose everything. My reputation, my friendships, and the respect I've built over the years would all crumble. It's a secret I'll carry with me until the end of my days. Story 18. I was raised in a strict household where failure was never an option. My parents put immense pressure on me to succeed. Good grades, top college, high-paying job, the whole 9 yards. It worked for a while. I studied hard, got into a prestigious university, and even landed a great job after graduation. From the outside, I had it all. But the truth is, I've been hiding a secret for years. I have a deep fear of failure, so much so that I've been living a double life. To cope with the anxiety, I started taking performance-enhancing drugs. It started with Adderall to help me focus during my college years. But once I had the job, I couldn't stop. It made me feel like I was unstoppable. I was able to work long hours and keep up with my demanding career. But the cost was my mental and physical health. I became addicted to the rush, and I couldn't stop taking the pills. No one knows about my addiction. I've kept it hidden from my family, friends, and colleagues. I fear that if they knew, they'd think I'm weak and incapable of handling the pressure. I know I'm at risk of losing everything I've worked so hard for, but the addiction is too strong to break free from. I've tried to stop many times, but the temptation is always there. Every day, I live with the fear that one day someone will find out, and everything I've built will collapse. Story 19. I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone else's business. My family was well respected, and we had a reputation to uphold. But there was one thing that no one knew about me. When I was a teenager, I spent years being sexually abused by a close relative. The abuse started when I was just 13 years old and continued for several years. I kept it a secret because I was terrified that no one would believe me, and I didn't want to destroy my family. The abuse ended when I left for college, but the scars it left on me are still with me. I never told anyone because I didn't want to be the one to tear my family apart. I've since built a life for myself. I have a job, a supportive partner, and I'm in therapy, but that secret never goes away. There are times when I find myself alone, and the memories flood back. I wonder if I'll ever truly be free from the shame and fear that have controlled my life for so long. I never told my partner about what happened, and I don't know if I ever will. I love them, but I'm terrified of how they'll look at me if they know. I live in constant fear that someone will find out. What if my abuser comes back into my life? What if I get triggered in front of someone and the truth comes out? I don't know if I can ever fully heal, but I know I can never tell any. It would destroy my family, and I can't risk that. Story 20. I've always been the good kid in my family, the one who did everything right, got good grades, never got into trouble. But the truth is, for the past 5 years, I've been living a secret life as a drug. I got involved with the wrong crowd when I was in my late teens, and at first it seemed like easy money. I started out small, selling weed to people I barely knew. But soon, I found myself tangled in something much deeper. I didn't expect things to spiral so quick. I became friends with people involved in harder drugs, and before I knew it, I was selling meth. The money was tempting, and I convinced myself that it was just a temporary thing. But the more I got involved, the harder it became to get out. I've been dealing for years, hiding it from everyone I know. My family thinks I'm just a normal guy with a stable job, but the truth is that I'm living on the edge. I'm terrified that one day I'll get caught. If anyone found out, my entire life would be destroyed. I'd lose everything I've built and my family would be devastated. I'm trapped in this life, and I don't know how to escape. I tell myself that I'll quit soon, but every time I try, the fear of losing everything I've worked for keeps me coming back. The guilt weighs on me every day, and I don't know how much longer I can keep up the facade. Story 21. I'm a professional photographer. I capture moments that others cherish forever, and people love the photos I take. But what they don't know is that the way I capture these moments is often fake. I manipulate the photos I take to make them look better than they actually are. In my photo shoots, I add props, change the lighting, and sometimes even use Photoshop to alter the way people look. I tell my clients it's just a little editing, but in reality I completely reconstruct their images. It started out small, just adding a bit of light here and there. But over time, it became an obsession. I would create beautiful illusions in my photos that I could never replicate in real life. At first, my clients were amazed. They loved the pictures I gave them. But the more I did it, the more I realized how fake my work really was. I was being celebrated for images that were, in some ways, lies. It became harder to sleep at night, knowing that people were praising me for things I didn't create authentic. But the truth is, if I stopped this, I'd lose everything. My reputation is built on these perfect, idealized images. If anyone ever found out how much I manipulated my photos, I'd be exposed as a fraud. My clients would never trust me again, and I would lose my business. The guilt of living this lie has become unbearable, but I'm too afraid to come clean. I don't know how much longer I can keep pretending. Story 22. I was once married to the love of my life, but I secretly never wanted to have children. For years, I went along with it because I thought it was what my wife wanted, and I loved her too much to disappoint her. We had a beautiful wedding and we started our life together. But as the years passed, my desire to be a parent never grew. I told myself I'd eventually feel ready, but I never did. It got worse when we started trying for a baby. Every time we went through the process, I felt more and more disconnected. My wife was so hopeful, but I wasn't. I was terrified. I didn't want to bring a child into the world when I knew I wasn't ready, but I didn't know how to tell her the truth without destroying everything. So, I kept pretending. We struggled with infertility for a while, and I went along with it, even though part of me felt relieved that the process wasn't working. But then one day, my wife became pregnant. I didn't know how to react. I should have been overjoyed, but I was filled with dread. Deep down, I wasn't sure I wanted to be a parent at all. I was too scared to tell her the truth. We now have a beautiful child and I'm a father, but every day, I wonder if I'm ruining this little life by pretending to be the dad I'm supposed to be. I can't tell her that I've been living a lie because I know it would destroy her. Story 23. I was a college athlete, and my dream was always to go professional in my sport. I worked hard every day, pushing my body to the limit, sacrificing my social life, and focusing all my energy on my training. But there's something no one knows. I never had the talent to go pro. I made it on the team not because of my skill, but because of a decision I made that I'm too ashamed to admit. I took performance-enhancing drugs. It started with small doses. I convinced myself that it was just helping me stay in the game longer, recover faster, and keep my spot on the team. Soon I was hooked. I couldn't play without them. I started winning competitions and getting more attention, and people began to believe in my potential. Coaches started seeing me as one of their top players, but all of it was a lie. The drugs were the only thing keeping me competitive. After college, I was drafted by a professional team, and for a while, it seemed like my dream had come true. But it wasn't real. I wasn't the athlete people thought I was. I was terrified of getting caught and losing everything, so I kept taking the drugs in secret. Eventually, I suffered a career-ending injury, and the drugs only made it worse. But the worst part is that I never told anyone. I walked away from the sport, pretending it was all part of a normal retirement. Now, I live with the guilt of how I deceived everyone around me. If anyone knew the truth, they would hate me. Story 24. I grew up in a small town, and my family was one of the most respected in the community. We were known for our charitable work, our generosity, and our strong family values. But there's a secret that no one knows about me. I've been embezzling money from my family's business for years. I started doing it when I was in my late 20s and could never stop. I used the money to fund a lifestyle that I could never afford. Luxury cars, expensive vacations, designer clothes. I told myself that it was a temporary thing. I convinced myself I'd pay it all back eventually, but the truth is, it's never been about paying it back. The more I took, the more I wanted. I justified it by telling myself that I was entitled to it, that I deserved the finer things in life. But now, the amount I've taken is astronomical and there's no way to return it. The guilt eats me alive, and every time I see my family, I wonder if they suspect anything. They have no idea what I've been doing. If they ever found out, it would destroy my family. It would ruin everything they've worked for, and it would destroy my relationship with them forever. I'm trapped in this cycle of lies, and I don't know how to get out. Every time I buy something extravagant, I feel the weight of the secret growing heavier. I don't know if I'll ever be able to come clean, and I'm afraid I'll have to live with the consequences of this lie for the rest of my life. Story 25. I've always been the responsible. I'm the one my friends come to for advice, the one who handles all the tough situations with a calm demeanor. I've built a reputation as someone who's reliable and grounded. But the truth is, I've been secretly struggling with an addiction for years. It started with alcohol, just having a drink here and there to unwind after work. But over time, it spiraled out of control. I drink to escape. It's the only way I know how to cope with the stress and anxiety that have been eating away at me for years. But no one knows. I've hidden it from my partner, my friends, and even my therapist. I've convinced myself that I'm managing it, that I can control it. But I know deep down that I'm lying to myself. There have been days when I've woken up in a haze, not remembering how I got home. I've lied to everyone about where I've been or why I'm so tired. The worst part is that I'm terrified of being exposed. I'm scared of losing everything: my job, my relationship, my friends. If anyone finds out, they'll see me as weak, as someone who couldn't live up to the image I've built. Every time I hide a bottle or sneak away to drink, I feel like I'm betraying the people who care about me. But I can't stop. The fear of the truth coming out is worse than the addiction itself. So I keep up the facade, hoping that one day I'll find a way out. But every day, the weight of this secret gets heavier. Story 26. I've always been the person who gives advice to others. Whether it's relationship advice, career tips, or just words of encouragement, I've always prided myself on being the wise one in my circle. But the truth is, I'm a complete mess. I've been lying to everyone around me for years, pretending to have my life together, when in reality, I'm struggling to keep it all from falling apart. It started in my early 20s when I graduated college. I landed a job in a field that I was passionate about, but the pressure to succeed quickly overwhelmed me. The hours were long, and the expectations were high. Slowly, I began losing control. I started drinking heavily after work, just to cope with the stress. What was once a social habit became a dependency, and I began using alcohol to numb the feelings of inadequacy that haunted, but I never told anyone. No one knows that the calm, collected person they turn to for advice is secretly drowning in a sea of self-doubt and addiction. Over time, my work began to suffer, and I started showing up late, missing deadlines, and lying about why I was tired. But I kept pretending that everything was fine and no one suspected anything. I'm still holding on to my job, but the truth is, I'm not sure how much longer I can keep this up. I'm afraid that one day someone will notice how much I'm struggling, and everything will come crashing down. The guilt is unbearable, but I can't find a way out without losing everything. Story 27. I've been married for 6 years, and I love my wife more than anything in the world. She's kind, supportive, and everything I could ever want in a partner. But there's a secret I've been hiding from her, the secret of what I did before we met. Before I met my wife, I was involved in some very dangerous activities. I was part of a group that operated on the wrong side of the law. We were involved in various illegal activities, including smuggling and extortion. It wasn't a life I was proud of, but it was one I couldn't escape from easily. After one particularly dangerous run, I made the decision to get out. I left that life behind and moved to a different city, far away from everything I knew. I met my wife shortly after and built a new life. But I never told her about my past. She knows I've had a few issues in the past, but she doesn't know the full extent of what I was involved in. If she ever found out, I'm afraid she would leave. The thought of losing her terrifies me more than anything. I've never fully told anyone what I did, and now it feels like this secret is eating me alive. Every day, I live in fear that my past will catch up with. Sometimes I wonder if my old associates will ever come looking for me. I'm trying to move forward, but I can't escape the guilt and the fear of losing everything I've worked so hard to build with my wife. Story 28. I've been living with a secret addiction for almost a decade, and it's tearing me apart. I've been addicted to gambling. It started out innocently enough. I went to a casino with some friends just to have a good time, but soon, I found myself hooked. The thrill of winning money became an obsession, and before I knew it, I was gambling away any savings I had. I'd win big one night and lose it all the next. I couldn't stop. At first, I tried to keep it under control, but my addiction grew worse. I started borrowing money from family and friends to cover my losses. I've lied to everyone around me about where I've been, why I'm always so stressed, and why I never seem to have enough money. Every time I lost, I promised myself I'd stop, but the urge to gamble would always pull me back in. I've gone to great lengths to hide my addiction from my spouse. They think I'm just working late or spending time with friends, but the truth is that I'm at the casino, blowing through more money than I should. I'm terrified that one day, the truth will come out and I'll lose everything. The guilt I feel is overwhelming, but I can't seem to break free from the cycle. Every day I wake up, I wonder if today will be the day someone finally finds out. Story 29. A few years ago, I got caught up in something I never expected. I was a regular at a local gym, just trying to stay in shape. But one day, I started chatting with a guy who claimed to be a personal trainer. He was charming and convincing, and before long, he talked me into trying some supplements that he promised would help me get the results I wanted. I didn't think much of it, just some protein shakes and vitamins, or so I thought. I quickly began noticing dramatic changes in my body. I was getting stronger, more muscular, and faster than I ever had before. But the truth was, the supplements weren't just protein. They were steroids. At first, I was thrilled with the results. But as time went on, I realized how dangerous this was. My temper started to flare up, and my body began to change in ways I couldn't control. I knew I was risking my health, but I couldn't stop. I became addicted to the way I looked and felt. I started to take higher doses, convinced that I could maintain this new body. But the side effects became more intense. My mood swings became erratic, and I started pushing people away. My friends and family noticed the changes, but never asked about it directly. They just assumed it was the gym working wonders. Now, years later, I'm still taking steroids, hiding it from everyone around. I'm terrified of the long-term effects, but I'm even more afraid of coming clean. If anyone found out what I've been doing, I'd lose everything. My career, my reputation, and my relationships would all be gone. The pressure to keep this secret is slowly breaking me, but I don't know how to stop. Story 30. I'm a successful real estate agent, and on the surface, my life seems perfect. I make a good living, have a nice house, and enjoy a comfortable lifestyle. But there's something no one knows about me. I've been embezzling money from my clients. It started with small amounts, just a few thousand here and there. I told myself it was a one-time thing. But once I tasted the thrill of taking money that wasn't mine, I couldn't stop. It became a habit. Each deal, I would skim a little bit off the top. I'd tell myself it was just a bonus I deserved after working so hard for my clients. The guilt weighed on, but the temptation to keep going was too great. I kept the money in a separate account, where no one could trace it. But the truth is, I've taken hundreds of thousands of dollars, and if anyone found out, I'd be arrested and my career would be over. I've been living in fear for years, knowing that if I get caught, everything I've built will crumble. I can't even look at my clients the same way anymore. I'm constantly afraid that one day someone will find out, and I'll lose my career, my freedom, and everything I've worked so hard to build. The guilt is suffocating, but I don't know how to stop. Every time I think about confessing, I wonder if I'll be able to live with the consequences. Story 31. I've always been the fun friend in my... I'm the one who organizes outings, makes people laugh, and keeps the mood light. But the truth is, I'm hiding a deep sadness that no one knows about. Every day I struggle with severe anxiety and depression, but I've never let it show. I've learned how to put on a mask pretending to be the carefree person everyone expects me to be, while inside, I feel like I'm falling apart. My friends have no idea how bad things have gotten. I've had multiple panic attacks that I've had to hide, and there are days when I can barely get out of bed. But I don't want to burden anyone with my problems. I fear that if I tell them what's really going on, they'll pity me or think I'm weak. So I keep quiet and push through, pretending everything is fine. I've even avoided seeking professional help because I'm scared of being judged. The worst part is that I've been lying to myself as well. I keep telling myself that I'm okay, that things will get better, but they never do. The fear of opening up is paralyzing, and I can't imagine how I'd explain this to the people I care about. The guilt of pretending to be someone I'm not is eating me alive, but I feel trapped in my own lies. I just wish I could be honest about my struggles, but I'm terrified of how it will change everything. Story 32. When I was younger, I made a terrible decision that has followed me for years. I was in my late teens, and I was desperate for money. A friend of mine introduced me to a side job that seemed harmless enough, helping to distribute packages for a friend who worked in the shipping industry. At first, it was just a few packages here and there, and the money was easy. But it didn't take long for things to escalate. Before I knew it, I was helping to smuggle illegal items across state lines. I knew it was wrong, but the money was so good, and I convinced myself that I was just doing it temporarily. That was a lie. Over the course of a few years, I became more and more involved, moving larger quantities and taking on more risk. Eventually, I got caught in a sting operation, but by some miracle, I was let off with a warning due to lack of evidence. The truth is, I've never stopped living with that fear. No one in my family or my circle of friends knows what I was involved in. I've worked hard to rebuild my life, but that dark part of my past is something I can never fully escape. If anyone ever found out, my life would be over. I'd lose my job, my relationships, and everything I've worked for. I live every day in fear that someone will uncover my past, and it haunts me. Story 33. I'm a teacher, and I absolutely love working with my students. I have a passion for helping others learn and grow. But behind this image of being a dedicated educator, there's a dark secret that I can't share with anyone. About 5 years ago, I was in an abusive relationship. It was emotionally and physically exhausting, but I stayed in it because I didn't know how to get out. I felt like I was trapped, but more than that, I was terrified of leaving. One day, after a particularly violent argument, my partner attacked me. I didn't want to press charges because I was scared of the consequences, so I covered up the bruises and told everyone that I had fallen. I told myself that I would leave soon, but I didn't. It wasn't until one of my students noticed the bruises that I finally found the courage to walk away. They asked me what happened, and for the first time in months, I broke down in front of someone. I left that relationship and started over, but I still haven't told anyone the full story. I don't think they would ever understand how difficult it was to leave, or how much it still affects me today. I constantly worry that if my students or colleagues found out, they would see me differently, or worse, they would pity me. The shame of what I went through has haunted me for years, and I don't know how to move forward without fully confronting it. Story 34. I come from a family with a long history of mental illness, and I always promised myself that I would never fall into the same pattern. But when I hit my 30s, I realized I was in denial. I started experiencing extreme mood swings, feeling both intensely euphoric and deeply depressed, and I began to lose control of my emotions. I told myself it was just stress from work and personal life, but it was becoming clear that something wasn't right. I went to a therapist and was diagnosed with bipolar disorder, but I didn't want to accept it. I didn't want to admit that I was like my family, so I kept it a secret. I never told my partner, my friends, or anyone close to me. I kept taking my medication in private, making sure no one saw me struggle. I felt ashamed and embarrassed. I didn't want anyone to see me as unstable or weak, so I pretended that everything was fine. But it's been harder to keep up the act. My episodes have become more frequent and more intense, and I feel like I'm losing control. The guilt of hiding my diagnosis from the people I love is overwhelming. I'm terrified that if I tell them, they'll treat me differently or think less of. I don't know how much longer I can keep up the facade of being okay when, deep down, I'm struggling just to stay balanced. Story 35. I was an artist when I was younger, full of passion and creativity. I dreamed of one day making it big, having my work displayed in galleries and admired by collectors. But life doesn't always go as planned. Over the years, I gave up on my dream of being a full-time artist and settled for a corporate job in marketing to pay the bills. I stopped painting, stopped creating, and my dreams slipped away. The worst part? I've been lying to everyone around me. I tell people that I've stopped painting because I'm too busy with work or that I've moved on from my art, but the truth is, I'm terrified. I'm scared that my work isn't good enough, that no one would care about it any. I've had the urge to paint again countless times, but I've never had the courage to pick up a brush. The idea of showing my work to anyone terrifies me because I feel like I've lost my touch. I've kept this secret from my partner, my friends, and even myself. I've convinced myself that I've moved on. But the truth is, I'm still in love with art. I still want to create, but I'm afraid of failing. I've become comfortable in my corporate life, but it's hollow. I'm living a life that isn't truly mine, and I don't know how to change it without risking everything. Every time I see someone else's art, I feel both inspired and ashamed. I wonder if I'll ever have the courage to start again.